Tonight, with American troops on the ground overseas, with great political divisions at home, a soaring stock market, a rapidly souring housing market, Americans go to the polls to decide which party will control Congress on this election night 2006.
From NBC News. Decision 2006, Election Night. Live from our world headquarters in New York, here is Brian Williams.
And good evening. This will be a history-making midterm election. We just do not know the extent of it quite yet. For all the major polls that have closed at this hour, all the races we know about, there is still a lot that is yet to transpire. This is one of the big ones we are waiting for, the very closely followed Senate race in the state of Virginia. Costly and bitter. The two, Allen and Webb, are separated by too little, still too early, as it is in the other big race in Tennessee. Harold Ford, the scion of that political family, versus Bob Corker. In the state of Missouri, another race that has come on hard and strong, too early to call at this hour. Conrad Burns in Montana, struggling for his political life tonight, too early to call. Here is some of what we know, a Democrat romp through some of the Senate seats tonight. Sheldon Whitehouse has turned away the incumbent senator in Rhode Island. In New Jersey, Bob Menendez, a promotion from House to Senate, beating the son of the former governor, Tom Kean, there. A big and closely watched race in the state of Maryland. Ben Cardin going to the Senate from the state of Maryland. Sherrod Brown turns away the incumbent Republican Senator Mike DeWine in the state of Ohio. Pennsylvania, another son of a former governor, this one victorious. Bob Casey, the anti-abortion rights Democrat. And in Connecticut, a man we last knew as a Democrat, Joe Lieberman, turned away in his own party primary, comes back and runs a race as an independent against a single-issue candidate. Joe Lieberman will return to the U.S. Senate, this time as an independent. We go quickly now to Tim Russert to talk about where we are. A few minutes ago, Tim, I saw you take the whiteboard out of its container and you said, it's time.
This is it, Brian. We said the Democrats had to hold two seats, New Jersey and Maryland. They've done it. Now they must win 6 of these 7 seats. They have won Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Rhode Island. They are halfway to getting control of the U.S. Senate. They must win 3 of these 4, Virginia, Montana, Missouri, Tennessee. They need 3 of those 4. They're all in play. You say, what if they just won 2 of those 4? Wouldn't it be 50-50, a tie in the U.S. Senate? The answer is yes. But Dick Cheney, the vice president, is president of the Senate. He would cast the deciding vote to keep the Republican in the leadership of the Senate. They need to win 3 in order to control the Senate.
Talk about the significance of the run you've seen the Democrats on so far, even though we keep stressing it is early yet tonight.
They have won 5 of the 9 they need. They have won in the East and the Midwest. A state like Ohio, if John Kerry had carried Ohio, he'd be president. This is very significant gains for the Democrats, but they still haven't broken down the firewall the Republicans have set up in Virginia, Montana, Missouri, and Tennessee, and captured control of the Senate.
Tim, we'll keep talking about this all night. We also have to talk about the House of Representatives, where the math is 15 seats. And among the best professionals in the business we can call upon here tonight, Tom Brokaw with us. And Tom, let's talk about the mood of this electorate, Decision 2006.
I was just looking at some numbers from our exit poll, the national mood. Congress had higher negatives than the president did. 62% of the people said that they didn't approve of what Congress was doing. Big issue, Foley, 54 to 38% negative vote on how the House Republican leadership handled it. Iraq, 68% of the people who voted said it was very or extremely important to them. And what to do now, by a 56 to 37% vote, they said, let's get some of the troops or all of them out of there. I think that's a manifestation of the anger in the country that you see just in those few statistics that I've cited for you.
So what about the great Tip O'Neill quote, all politics is local? They've gone and nationalized the Iraq issue on a series of local elections.
Well, all politics is local except when the country's at war. And when the war is not going well, and generals and even Republicans say that it's not going well, then the people begin to vote on that. And I think one of the things that we're going to look at tomorrow morning, where did women vote? Women have particularly strong feelings during war about shipping their sons and daughters, in this case, off to war. The president continues to say, we have a plan, we're going to stick with it. But all the promises that he's made up to this point have not been able to be fulfilled by him. And as I went around the country, I heard from more Republicans than I did Democrats about a sense of betrayal, I guess is the best way of describing it.
Tom, thanks. And we already know how and why some people voted tonight, and with us tracking exit polls all night, Campbell Brown. Campbell, what do you have?
Well, Brian, we have some more numbers to back up what Tom was hinting at and how President Bush weighs into all of this. Midterm elections are often a referendum on the president. And even though he wasn't on the ballot, George Bush was a big factor today. President Bush and anger over the war in Iraq. First to the president's job approval rating, which stands at 42%, and that's close to what President Reagan's was in 1982 when the Republicans lost 26 House seats, though we can't project what will happen on that score yet tonight. What's notable about the president's 58% disapproval number this year is that it includes 43% who say they strongly disapprove of the job he's doing, indicating some serious anger on the minds of many voters. More than half of the voters today said President Bush was a factor in their decision on how they voted for the candidate in their congressional district. And by a margin of 38 to 22%, more said they were voting to express opposition to the president rather than support. And by the way, this is a dramatic drop in support for the president from 4 years ago. What is driving that? The war in Iraq. As we've seen all the polls leading up to this election, Iraq is a top concern this year, and that held true in the voting booths today. Just 41% of voters today said they approve of the war in Iraq. 57% disapprove, and that number includes 35% who strongly disapprove. One of the reasons for that, voters don't see the war in Iraq as improving the long-term security of the United States. 59% said no to that question. Just 34% said yes. Perhaps as a result, the gap between which party voters think will keep them safe from terrorism has narrowed considerably. Majorities think both Republicans and Democrats can. So, Brian, Republicans no longer owning that issue on terrorism particularly.
All right. Campbell Brown, we'll keep looking at the exit poll numbers tonight as we go on through the evening. When people who do politics for a living sit down to discuss their fantasy or potential nominees for the next time we're at this in the presidential stakes 2 years from now, two names come up often of late. They are Barack Obama and John McCain. Both gentlemen are with us tonight. Senator McCain, we will talk to you first. First question, we can only report on what we know, and those are the results so far. This can't be labeled anything beyond that, Senator, but what message have you taken away from these returns, these Republican losses in the Senate specifically so far where it pertains to the war in Iraq?
Well, I think the overall results are directly related to a number of things, including the war in Iraq, including the fact that we haven't been careful stewards of the taxpayers' dollars, that many of our base believe we value power over principle, and we haven't adhered to the conservative principles, which I think still the majority of Americans feel it's in their priorities. But on the war in Iraq, of course it's frustrating. It's frustrating to all of us, and Americans are very frustrated. And yet, at the same time, I've not heard of a recipe as to how we can work this out. I am hopeful that once we go back into session that we could sit down and work some of this out, because it is terribly frustrating. We know that it's not going well, But I still believe that if you leave at a date certain or precipitously, that chaos would ensue. And most every military expert I know feels the same way. So we've got to prevail here. But I understand the frustration Americans feel. But I think it's spending. I think it's not keeping to our conservative principles. And I think that the scandals have had something to do with it as well.
Senator, what, if anything, does this say so far about the President and Commander-in-Chief, George W. Bush?
Well, I think it's been rough on all of us. I think the view that people have of frustration certainly reflects on him as well as us. But to blame this failure on the President, I don't think that that's fair. I think we in Congress, for example, every Republican conservative I know has heard of the bridge to nowhere. We can't continue to frivolously spend and earmark and these pork barrel projects and call ourselves fiscal conservatives.
And Senator McCain, how will this change you at all, your behavior, your plans for the future? Again, knowing what we know so far tonight and being able to project a certain distance out into the future.
I'm a student of history. We lost badly in 1976. Ronald Reagan charted our course in 1977. We came back in 1980 and gained the presidency and majority in the United States Senate. Look, these things are temporary. I still haven't, in all due respect to my Democrat friends, do much besides say we aren't Republicans. We'll get back on track. I believe that most Americans share our conservative philosophy, and I predict the next time you and I are on an election, Republicans will have rebounded.
Senator John McCain, Republican of Arizona tonight. Senator, thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you.
Now to our second guest, another member of the Senate, the freshman from Illinois, the Democrat Barack Obama. Senator, your interpretation of these numbers and corollarily the message it gives to your party.
Well, look, I think it's still early. We are cautiously optimistic. I think what is absolutely clear, and I started to hear this everywhere I went as I traveled over the last month on behalf of candidates, is that the American people are tired of ideology. They don't want gridlock. They don't want slash and burn politics, and they don't want division. What they do want are a set of common sense, practical approaches to some of the key challenges that we face. They are interested in figuring out, how do we deal with skyrocketing healthcare costs? What are we going to do to make college more affordable? How can we ensure that our children are getting the kind of math and science instruction they need to compete? And how do we create a workable plan for Iraq? And so I think the critical message in this election is going to be that the American people are in a serious mood. They recognize the challenges we face, and they are hopeful that the Democrats can provide some leadership that's been lacking from the other side, both in Congress and the White House.
Senator Obama, if tonight's numbers in the end do indeed put Democrats in positions of management, House, Senate, or perhaps even both, are the Democrats first prepared to handle it, to manage themselves in leadership positions?
Well, I think there is a lot of interest on the part of Democrats to work constructively and quickly to send a message to the American people that we want to govern. And I think it's absolutely critical that Democrats focus not on payback, but on progress. And if we are passing an increase in the minimum wage, if we are making college loans more affordable, if we're sitting down with the Baker-Hamilton Commission and the President, and all of us are willing to think constructively about what are the best options in Iraq. I personally believe a phased withdrawal can change the dynamic and make sure that the Iraqis and the regional powers in that area are finally taking seriously the need for political compromise. But I'm open to other conversations. The point is, if we sit down and base our decision-making on facts and not based on ideology, then I think we can make some real progress. And
Senator, last question. Someone very close to you told me in the last 10 days you were 60-40 leaning yes as you pursue your journey toward your decision to perhaps pursue the presidency. Does tonight change anything? Are you any closer?
Well, first of all, that person's even a better prognosticator than some of your pollsters there. I haven't had time to think about it. What I've said is that after the election, I'm going to reflect both on the external landscape and do I have something to contribute to the debate of where we need to take this country over the next 2 years, but also internally, is this something that I feel compelled to do and my family is prepared to do. And that's going to take, I'd say, several weeks.
Well, the election will be over in a couple hours, Senator. We'll check back in with you then. Thank you very much, Senator Barack Obama, Democrat from the state of Illinois. We'll take a break. Our coverage will continue on the other side. We still have the math to get to. The House of Representatives, where the Democrats need 15 seats to take control. We have perhaps a long night ahead of us. Our Decision 2006 coverage continues from New York right after this.
Decision 2006 is sponsored in part by New York Life, the company you keep.
We are back. Decision 2006, limited results coming in, but so far in a vein of states running from the east to the Ohio River Valley, certainly a run of big Democratic victories. We go to the White House. NBC News chief White House correspondent David Gregory. And David, I know you've been talking to a lot of people inside that building behind you tonight. How would you say the mood is running right now?
It's pretty downcast, and I'd have to say that the president's top advisors who are watching returns with him and the residents are hunkered down at this point as there's more and more bad news. They've been trying to tamp down these high expectations for Democrats all day, only to have their own high expectations dashed in places like Maryland, where they thought the Republican had an opportunity that has not come to pass. What they are seeing and what they're distressed about is that you see Democrats going into red territory, making Bush and the war the issue and capturing territory from Republicans. That's a trend that they're worried about. Still, however, Brian, they see this firewall, Montana, Missouri, Virginia, perhaps Tennessee, as being what keeps the Senate in Republican hands.
And David, when will we hear from the president or some official explanation of what they'll take away from tonight?
Not until tomorrow. As I say, they're pretty hunkered down tonight on what has been a night of pretty bad news so far. We expect to hear from the president tomorrow.
All right, David Gregory outside the White House tonight. Chilly night in Washington, D.C. A lot of the East Coast socked in under precipitation, as is the Pacific Northwest. All of it, some of the ingredients going into the vote today. Another break. We come back. We talk with Tim Russert about how close the Democrats are in the House right after this.
From NBC News, Decision 2006, Election Night continues. Here again is Brian Williams.
We are back, and as the results come into us, still a lot of races either categorized as too close to call or too early a call to call across this nation. As we said at the top of tonight's broadcast, early Democratic gains still don't get them yet, so far this evening, the math that they need. We're going to talk to two men who have been instrumental in the political process leading up to tonight. But first, over to Tim Russert. Tim, again, it bears repeating, some major victories by the Democrats. You can drive west from the state of New Jersey, go all the way through Ohio tonight on this new Democratic Senate territory, but also there's the House, as you just ran through.
They need 15 seats in the House. They said they've gained 5, Brian. They've won 3 in Indiana alone, 1 in Connecticut, 1 in Kentucky. What we're seeing, perhaps, is a bit of a realignment. The Democrats solidifying their control in the Northeast, but picking up seats in the Mid-Atlantic and in the Midwest, and forcing the Republicans in the House to become more and more a party of the South and the Rocky Mountains. We haven't seen whether this will play out completely, but early indications are the Democrats are well on their way to recapturing the House and making significant gains in the Senate and in the governorships of the battleground Midwest.
When we talk about the House of Representatives, if the Democrats reach their goal tonight, a lot of people are lying back waiting for them to turn it into a series of hearings, a courtroom, as the expression goes, and that it'll all be about retribution, the politics of slash and burn, as we heard Senator Obama. What's going to be the force that could come to the fore in the House to prevent that?
John Conyers, who would become the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, had on his website the notion of impeachment until May of this year, and it was taken down. If Nancy Pelosi becomes Speaker, she says that impeachment is off the table. But that does not mean there would not be robust oversight of Iraq, of Halliburton, of Katrina, and what went wrong with the weapons of mass destruction. But on the other hand, they realize they need a positive agenda. And I would look for the Democrats, if they take control of one of the houses, to push vigorously for minimum wage, push vigorously for a vote on embryonic stem cell research. They need to have a positive agenda and not just be a party in opposition to the president.
Tim, thanks. I'm told we can go now to Democratic Congressman Rahm Emanuel of the state of Illinois, former Clinton White House aide, who has run the Democratic effort in these House races tonight. He is joined by veteran Republican strategist Ed Gillespie tonight. Rahm, first to you. Your summation of what you've seen so far this evening.
Well, in every part of the country, from Indiana to Connecticut to New Hampshire to Pennsylvania to Kentucky, you're seeing, and even Ohio, Democrats are sweeping. And there's some significant wins, like in Nancy Johnson losing to Chris Murphy, the state senator. Nancy Johnson was the author of the prescription drug bill. She was supposed to be there. She spent $4.5 million. And outspent them 2-1, and she went down. People clearly voted for change. We're halfway around the bend. We have 8 seats already. We need the 15. I think Tim points out that the Republicans, as he said, are becoming more and more a Southern party, and I believe we're going to have victories in the Southwest and the Rocky Mountain area, and I think that's going to be significant for us. And I think it's clear the American people said they've had enough. After 6 years of the Republican experiment, they want change.
Rom, same question just posed to Tim. How do you prevent the House of Representatives hearing rooms from becoming a courtroom for the next 2 years? And do you think tonight's message carries the embedded message that the American people are sick of division?
Well, there's no doubt, and we're going to operate the House of Representatives as a bipartisan operation, and because people have to represent their constituents. We have to. The problem of Iraq has been partisanized and politicized for too long by the White House, and it's clear we're going to need a bipartisan approach. The second thing is, we do have a positive agenda, and we're going to put those points on the board. We are going to have a vote on the minimum wage, and I guarantee Republicans will join the Democrats who lead in that way. We are going to have a vote on direct negotiations for lower prescription drug prices, and Republicans will join the Democrats in their support of our agenda, stem cell research. But we will have oversight for the billions upon billions of dollars that have been wasted and lost. And that is our responsibility, because we've gone 3 years with the war with no accountability by anybody.
Congressman Rahm Emanuel, Democrat of the state of Illinois, thank you very much for being with us. Brings us to Ed Gillespie. Ed, on the other side, first of all, this message on Iraq. If we stop time, just based on the returns we have seen so far tonight, we had tonight on NBC Nightly News, Senator Santorum in Pennsylvania say this isn't about Iraq. This is about our own election here. But, Ed, the voters had another idea.
Well, you know, we'll wait and see what turns out, Brian. I'm disappointed, obviously, about Senator Santorum's loss, but you see, I think I just hear Joe Lieberman claiming victory, and obviously Iraq was a central issue in Connecticut in that campaign. Rahm cited the loss of Nancy Johnson, which I hated to see, but Chris Shays won re-election there, Jeff Davis in Kentucky. So I don't know if they're on track to meet the historic second midterm average over the past, in modern times, of 28 seats or not. We may still hang on. Some of these seats are hard fought and close. Here in Virginia, Senator Allen continues to be up with about 94% of the vote in. He's up 21,000 votes. Some of theirs are out, some of ours are out. It's going to be close, but I think he's going to win. So But look, I think we have to listen to the voters, and they're clearly saying that there are concerns. We have concerns with Iraq, and we need to address them.
All right, Ed, how do you do business differently from the White House to Capitol Hill tomorrow morning? What is this, provided again, just tonight's message, what is this chastened or perhaps changed GOP going to look like?
Well, as I said, Brian, I'm for listening to the voters. I think that's what you need to do. That's why we have elections in this great country. And there is, as you know, a bipartisan commission reviewing some options for Iraq, the Baker-Hamilton Commission, Secretary Baker, former Congressman Hamilton, Democrat. And they'll come forward with some thoughts, I think, that maybe that will help us to get some bipartisan consensus. Look, it is critically important that we have bipartisan consensus on how we go about winning the war on terror. There's been a division of late as to whether or not winning in Iraq is essential to winning in the war on terror. We've got to resolve that. I believe it is. Most Republicans do. Most Democrats don't. But we need to find some common ground here because this is about our national security.
Ed Gillespie, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Ed Gillespie, a longtime Republican political operative, talking about Republicans and Democrats. But tonight, when the book is written about this election, it may so easily key in on those independents. We have a live picture to show you. Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton, who as of tonight, you may recognize the man to the left, as of tonight will be returning to the U.S. Senate. She spent a fortune, cruised to victory in the end against a man most would refer to as token opposition. Former president has been very busy over the last several days. They sent him into one campaign visit last night at 9:30 at night in Rhode Island because they thought they had a chance at a Democratic pickup, and they got it. So both Clintons have been working hard in this race. We're going to go to Chip Reed in Washington. We have been talking all day, Chip, about these voting irregularities. We've been running with the number. 18 states have been handling official complaints, standing in line too long, too much ID required, or just plain old trickery at the polls. What can you tell us?
Well, most of it, Brian, is electronic voting, and we had predicted this. Everybody was aware that something was going to happen, and it's not as bad as some people had said it was going to be. It's about what everybody expected. A lot of confusion at the polls. About 16 million people are using electronic voting this voting day for the first time. And it's not only the voters, it's especially the poll workers who are confused by it. It really is complicated just getting those machines up and running. And in Colorado, Texas, Florida, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and a number of other states, they had difficulties there. Now, again, it's not as bad as it might have been, but let's keep in mind that there still could be big problems buried here, and we will probably only find that out in races that are really close. For example, if Tennessee or Virginia Senate race is really close, then the lawyers will dig in and see what's really there. Brian?
Chip Reed on Capitol Hill, an issue we will continue to follow in subsequent days on NBC Nightly News. We'll take another break in our coverage and continue on the other side as these race results come in. We'll take a look live at the new independent senator from the state of Connecticut, former Democrat Joe Lieberman, who says he will be caucusing and voting with his own party. He is a happy man tonight, having had a political near-death experience. Decision 2006 continues right after this. We are back. Election night headquarters, Decision 2006 here at 30 Rockefeller Plaza in New York. Thanks to the magic of videotape, seemingly out on the plaza, actually 8 stories above. Cozy on a rainy night in this studio. Russert and Brokaw crunched the numbers on both sides of me. Campbell Brown has been looking at the message embedded in the exit polling data tonight. Campbell.
And Brian, tonight it's kind of a move to the middle with the big question of whether control of Congress will switch to Democrats. Our exit poll tells us that if they're going to do it this year, Democrats will have to take a different path than Republicans did when they took control in 1994. Rather than appealing to their base voters, Democrats this year are pulling from the middle. Case in point, Independents generally split their votes in congressional elections. Well, not this year. Democrats had a 20-point edge among independents in the national exit poll, though we don't know yet how many independents turned out to vote. 4 years ago, those numbers were basically split. Democrats have widened their appeal among voters in the middle of the political spectrum. Among voters who describe themselves as moderate, 62% went for Democrats, 36% for Republicans, and suburbanites went for Democrats as well by a margin of 53 to 45%, slightly stronger than 4 years ago. And a caveat, even though these broad numbers look strong for Democrats, these races are all local, and most of them have not yet been called. So it's a really sort of a rejection of the polarization that we've seen.
We could find the key to the entire election in all of these exit poll numbers. Campbell, thank you for that. And another word on Senator Hillary Rodham Clinton accepting tonight this next term in office. My colleague Lester Holt is in her hotel ballroom, a stone's throw from here at the Sheraton on the west side of Manhattan. Lester, what's being said in there tonight that might indicate what many regard as the presumptive leading candidate for nomination?
Well, nothing from the senator herself. She just left the stage a moment ago, Brian, talking about the future in a second term as senator from New York. But, of course, on the lips of everyone here is the presidency in 08. She's long been thought to be the Democratic frontrunner if she wants it. Her people tonight telling me a short while ago she hasn't thought about it. Her plan was to start thinking about it after this election. Tomorrow she'll go around the state and thank people. She has carefully and deftly avoided and deflected that question throughout the campaign. But time is running out for her and the 20-something other potential candidates on both sides, Republican and Democrats. The first caucus, Brian, is 14 months from now in Iowa. So if you live in places like Iowa, South Carolina, New Hampshire, and Nevada, despite what the papers tell you tomorrow, the campaign season is not over. Now, for Hillary Clinton, the war could be an issue. She has been a supporter of the war. She voted for it. And while she called for the ouster, the resignation of Donald Rumsfeld, she is seen by many in the left in her party as being pro-war. That comes at a time now that Barack Obama has emerged on the scene as the latest Democratic rock star. He, of course, didn't have to lay a vote on the war issue. He simply has said it's poorly conceived and it has been poorly executed. On the Republican side, as we look to 08, the conventional wisdom has been if mainstream conservative Republicans don't do well, that might be an opening for so-called mavericks, or those who don't vote lockstep with a party. People perhaps like Senator John McCain, like the former New York City Mayor Rudolph Giuliani. Then there are those who may be standing on the outside tonight. They could be damaged goods. Senator John Kerry, of course, and those ill-timed remarks last week that many thought offensive to soldiers in Iraq, that could doom his chances in the view of many. And, of course, George Allen in Virginia had an unfortunate comment along the way in his race, and long seen as a potential front-runner as a Republican challenger for president, but a big question mark on him tonight. But clearly all eyes right now on those 4 states, Iowa, New Hampshire, Nevada, South Carolina. Things get underway in a very short order, and all the candidates will be looking at the results, the exit polling overnight, and perhaps making their moves very soon, Brian.
All right, Lester Holt at Clinton headquarters tonight here in New York. And Lester, a great point. To Tom Brokaw, more on that. Now, we learned tonight Senator Clinton hasn't thought about running for president, apparently, which will be a shock to a lot of people in politics in New York and Washington. But how does this, do you think, Tom, jumble up some of the best laid plans for the next time around in 08?
Well, I think it's a little too early to say that. We'll have a sorting out period here that will go on for a month or so as we look at these numbers. I think the races are all in place for the people on the Democratic side. Obviously, some Republicans have gotten hurt. George Allen thought that he was going to be a strong presidential candidate next time around. He may very well win this race in Virginia, but he's hurt himself. John Kerry in the closing days of the campaign on the Democratic side with his gaffe. I've been thinking a little bit about what this means for the presidency as well. The current president, you know, he said after he won by a very large popular vote last time around, I've got a lot of political capital and I'm going to spend it. Well, he may not be in bankruptcy tonight, but he's going to be bouncing a lot of checks by the end of the evening if these current trends continue. And it'll make it tough for him to be the force that he would like to be in the closing 2 years of his presidency, however large the gains are or small they are for the Democrats, as we now seem to think that they will do pretty well by the end of the evening.
And it'll be interesting if we do hear from the president tomorrow. Tim, we have about 20 seconds this time of night. You become a fog of numbers and dry erase markers.
The Democrats need 15 to take control of the House, Brian. They now are more than halfway there. We told you about Indiana, Kentucky, and Connecticut. Now New Hampshire. Congressman Charlie Bass has fallen. Ohio, the seat of Bob Ney, convicted, has fallen. And in North Carolina, Heath Schuler, former Washington Redskin quarterback, going back as a Democratic congressman.
And we'll be back with more right after this. We are back with some breaking news. Just told me as we came back from this break, Tim, we're going to go right to you, and I'm going to tell it to you as everyone else hears it. We can now confirm our projection. The Democrats will control the House of Representatives 231 to 204. Two giants just fell in the last 10 minutes. Clay Shaw, Curt Weldon, veterans each. What just happened in the last few minutes?
Well, we have the first woman speaker in the history of the United States, Nancy Pelosi. She is now in line, succession of the presidency, right behind the vice president. We will have John Conyers, chairman of Judiciary, Barney Frank, chairman of Banking,
Charlie Rangel,
chairman of Ways and Means, and the list goes on. The Democrats now have the gavels. They will bring people before them to answer questions. They will control the legislative agenda. They will decide which bills go to the floor for passage. And the president has to decide now, is he trying to govern with the Democrats, or is he going to try to continue to play to his base? He has some, and the Democrats have to decide, are they going to cooperate with the president? A fundamental transformation in our national government.
And remember, this is about the House. This is math that applies to the House of Representatives. In play tonight is control of the U.S. Senate. Let's check back in on some of these races and numbers that are too close to call. The big Senate race in the Commonwealth of Virginia. The equally large Senate race in the state of Tennessee. Those are going to be watched so closely tonight. In Missouri, as you work your way west, a big unknown, a race getting a lot of attention. And out in Montana, the Abramoff scandal stretches all the way out to Big Sky country. You see John Tester, the organic farmer, against Conrad Burns, the incumbent who's been in trouble on Abramoff and other issues. Money, the issue there. To David Gregory we go, checking in on the mood at the Bush White House. And David, again, this news we've announced in the last 3 minutes' time really changes further the tilt of the political world a bit for this White House.
It really does. Karl Rove was saying just hours ago that he wasn't there in terms of believing that the House could fall. Other Republicans made the point that that was the expectation in town, and even, frankly, within the White House, that the House would fall. Now you hear Republicans starting to talk about what a Democratic-run House of Representatives would be like. Nancy Pelosi, they say, will not have a liberal coalition. She'll have a lot of center-right congressmen and women that she'll have to contend with. There may be some openings, they argue, for the president on immigration, on the budget. You're beginning to see the mindset shift a little bit to how the president reaches out to something he hasn't experienced before as president, and that is a Democratic House.
All right, David Gregory at the White House, where the new world, in a way, starts tomorrow morning. And Tom Brokaw, I've always compared American politics to the pendulum inside a grandfather clock. Just in our lifetimes, think about how many times it has gone back and forth. The question, of course, tonight, now, given this milestone, are we in the midst of a reverse swing?
I don't think that we can say that yet. I always remember 1980 when Ronald Reagan swept this country and knocked off so many big lions in the United States Senate. 2 years later, the House went the other way. Yeah. He was in a lot of trouble. He recovered from that. What the country is saying, so far as I can read it, is that, look, we want you to all get together and start working out these problems. Let's find some solutions here. You heard Barack Obama say that that was his judgment about what was going on. This is not a huge philosophical clash, one extreme against the other extreme. Everybody trying to move to the middle. Tim and I were listening to Nancy Pelosi just 2 years ago when George Bush was reelected as president. She said, well, now it's their Congress. They're going to have to decide what they're going to do with it. And the question is, will the president go to the Congress and say, well, now it's up to you. You have to decide what to do with it? Or does he extend his hand and say, look, let's try to find some things? And then how do they respond to that if he comes to them?
And that becomes part of it, managing power in 15 seconds or less.
Iraq, Brian, is central to the future of this country. And the only way to deal with it is in a bipartisan way. Both sides have to decide if that's what they want to do.
All right, Tim Russert, Tom Brokaw, and of course Campbell Brown still has more exit polling as we go on through the night. We'll continue to track those numbers. We will keep going here. We'll also continue our coverage with our colleagues on MSNBC, where the coverage will continue all through the night into the morning. More, of course, in the morning on Today on NBC. Complete election updates here on the NBC television network and on your late local news for us and for now on what could still be a very long night. I'm Brian Williams, NBC News. Thanks for being with us.